60% of the $80 billion is going to enforcement. Increased audits, increased collection, increased litigation, all of the things that go along with enforcement, because the IRS is convinced and has the American people convinced that there is vast cheating going on when it comes to tax compliance. The ratio of enforcement to taxpayer education is not only imbalanced, it's so out of whack as to defy logic given the circumstances of the tax code that we have today. We've got a 14-to-1 ratio enforcement over taxpayer assistance and education, but here's the reality, and Congress can't seem to wrap its head around this, and the media doesn't know about these numbers, and they don't bother to look at these numbers, but I've talked about this for quite a bit over the years. 98.5% of every federal dollar is paid into the IRS, quote unquote, voluntarily. Now, when I use the word voluntary, I don't mean that people are making a choice. Let's see, I can pay my taxes or not, I guess I'll pay my taxes. Well, that's not how the IRS defines the term voluntary. The IRS defines the term voluntary as the act of complying with the law without intervention. That's what they call voluntary. And so when somebody files their tax return and pays their taxes, and they've squared up with the agency for a particular tax year, and the IRS didn't have to send a letter, or they didn't have to knock on the door of the revenue officer, that's called voluntary compliance. Doing what the law requires you to do without the IRS twisting your arm. That's voluntary compliance. The fact of the matter is, however you define it, people are paying their taxes at the rate of 98.5% versus 1.5% revenue collected through enforcement. And despite the fact that people are paying their taxes voluntarily, the IRS, rather than trying to help people, is deliberately spreading false information to people.